The celebration was supposed to be all about a championship. Instead, within hours of one of the biggest wins and unrivaled, the conversation shifted completely. What should have been a night focused on Breanna Stewart leading Miss Basketball Club to the title suddenly turned into a developing controversy involving one of the team's biggest names, Arike Ogunbowale. And because Ogunbowale is already one of the most recognizable stars in women's basketball, the attention around this story picked up almost instantly. Miss BC had just secured a major moment in the young history of Unrivaled by defeating Phantom BC 80-74 at Sephora Arena in Miami. It was a high-level finish, a high-energy atmosphere, and the kind of result that should have dominated headlines for all the right reasons. Breanna Stewart delivered like the superstar she has always been, putting up 32 points and carrying the offense when the game needed a closer. But she was not alone. Arike Ogunbowale, coming off the bench, gave Miss a huge lift and finished as the team's second leading scorer, with a performance that immediately stood out in a title game setting. Those are the kinds of contributions that become part of a player's big game resume. That is why the timing of what happened next made the entire situation feel so jarring. Just hours after helping Miss lift the trophy, Ogunbowale's name began appearing in reports tied not to basketball, not to a championship celebration, and not to a strong title game outing, but to an alleged arrest in Miami. And once that report surfaced, the focus of the entire night changed. According to reporting from Andy Slater, Ogunbowale was allegedly arrested while celebrating the championship at Club E11 even in Miami. The report claimed that police sources said she punched a man in the face, causing him to fall to the ground, and that the incident was also captured on camera. That allegation moved quickly across social media and basketball circles because of who Ogunbowale is and because of how sudden the news felt in contrast to the championship setting that had just unfolded. What makes this story especially sensitive is that, at least based on the information provided so far, there has not been official public confirmation laying out the full details of what happened. That matters. In situations like this, there is always intense pressure for immediate reactions, but when a report is still developing and official facts are limited, people tend to fill in the blanks before the full picture is available. That is exactly why this story has drawn so much attention so fast. The allegation itself is serious, but the uncertainty surrounding it is also a major part of why everyone is now watching for the next update. From a basketball perspective, it is hard to ignore how quickly the emotional tone of the night changed. 1 minute, the spotlight was on Miss BC becoming the second champion in Unrivaled history. The next, the conversation had shifted away from the title, away from Stewart's dominance, and away from Ogunbowale's production on the court, and toward a possible off-court incident that could carry consequences beyond one night in Miami. That is how fast a narrative can turn when a star player becomes connected to a developing legal or disciplinary issue. The Dallas Wings did not ignore it. They responded relatively quickly with a statement acknowledging awareness of an incident involving Ogunbowale and saying they were in the process of gathering more information. The organization also made it clear that further comment would come later, once more details were available. That response is important because it shows the team is taking the report seriously enough to look into it, while also avoiding jumping to conclusions before the facts are fully established. In situations like this, that is usually how teams try to manage the early stage of a fast-moving controversy. At the same time, Ogunbowale herself had not publicly addressed the allegation in the material provided. That silence is naturally going to keep interest high. When a player or profile is at the center of a report like this, fans and media immediately start waiting for the athlete's side, the team's next statement, possible law enforcement clarification, and any video or witness information that may surface. Until then, everything sits in a tense space where speculation can easily outrun confirmed information. That is a major reason this has become such a closely watched story. Arike Ogunbowale is not a fringe name. She is a WNBA All-Star, one of the most talented scorers in the league, and one of the faces associated with the Dallas Wings. She has built her reputation on big shot making, competitive edge, and star-level performances. When someone with that kind of profile becomes part of an alleged incident off the court, it immediately becomes bigger than a routine club report. It becomes a story about image, accountability, team response, and what happens next. It also raises a broader question about how quickly a championship night can be overshadowed. Miss BC should have been enjoying one of the defining moments of the league season. Stewart's performance was exactly the kind that should have led every highlight package and every recap. Ogunbowale's contribution should have been part of that winning narrative. Instead, the title itself became almost secondary once this report began circulating. That is the reality of sports news in the current media environment. Off-court controversy can overtake on-court accomplishment in a matter of minutes, especially when the person involved is already a major name. For Miss BC, that creates a strange aftermath around what should have been a clean celebration. Championships are supposed to lock in positive momentum. They're supposed to create headlines that build the brand of a team and a league. And in a newer competition like Unrivaled, moments like this matter even more because every major event helps shape public perception. So when a title win gets immediately connected to an alleged arrest involving one of the winning team stars, it changes the public conversation in a way the league likely never wanted. For the Wings, the situation is also delicate because they now have to manage both the internal and external side of the story. Internally, they need facts. Externally, they need to show that they are taking the matter seriously. That is why their statement was measured. They did not rush into a conclusion, and they did not pretend the report did not exist. They acknowledged awareness and essentially signaled that an information gathering phase is underway. That may seem routine, but in sports PR, those early statements matter because they often set the tone for how an organization will handle what comes next. And what comes next is where the real pressure begins. If there's official confirmation, video evidence, witness accounts, or police documentation that supports the allegation, then this story could quickly move from a rumor-driven sports controversy into a much more serious matter for Ogunbowale and possibly for the Wings. If, on the other hand, the details turn out to be incomplete, misleading, or more complicated than the initial report suggested, then the early reaction around the story may start to look very different. Right now, that uncertainty is the biggest factor keeping this in the spotlight. From a media standpoint, this is a kind of story that spreads because it combines three elements that always drive attention. First, there's a championship angle, which gives an immediate emotional contrast. Second, there is a star player element, because Ogunbowale is not an unknown athlete. Third, there is the allegation itself, which is serious enough to trigger widespread discussion even before all the facts are public. Put those three together, and you get exactly the kind of sports controversy that dominates conversation far beyond the final score. It is also worth noting how quickly fan reaction can become polarized in moments like this. Some people will immediately assume the worst because of the nature of the allegation. Others will hold back and say there is not enough official information yet. Some will focus on the team statement as evidence that the matter is serious. Others will argue that acknowledging an incident does not automatically confirm every reported detail. That divide is almost inevitable in a story at this stage, especially when the available information is still incomplete and heavily dependent on initial reporting. What makes the situation even more frustrating for basketball fans is that Ogunbowale had just delivered exactly the kind of performance that reminds people why she remains such a valuable player. Coming off the bench and still ending up as the second leading scorer in a championship game is not minor production. That is impact. That is the kind of outing that helps define winning teams. Normally, a player who does that will be waking up to praise, highlights, and conversations about how strong she looked on a big stage. Instead, the basketball itself has been pushed aside. This also puts extra focus on Ogunbowale's next public move. At some point, whether through a direct statement, a representative, or through the team process, there will almost certainly need to be some form of response if the story continues to grow. When public allegations reach this level of attention, silence can only last so long before it becomes part of the narrative itself. That does not mean a person must rush to speak before understanding the situation, but it does mean the public will keep waiting for something more concrete. In the meantime, the Wings will likely remain under pressure to clarify what they know and what steps, if any, they plan to take. That is especially true if more reporting surfaces. Team investigations in cases like this are often as much about timing and communication as they are about fact-finding. The organization has to balance fairness to the player with its responsibility to respond to public concern. That balance is never easy, And it becomes even harder when social media accelerates the story before all sides have spoken. For Unrivaled, this is not the kind of post-championship coverage any league wants. A title game should leave fans talking about the competition, the stars, and the future of the league. Instead, the league now finds itself adjacent to a controversy that could dominate the headlines connected to one of its biggest nights. That is unfortunate, because the game itself offered plenty to talk about. Stewart was brilliant. The championship had energy, and Mist earned a real statement win. But when an alleged off-court incident involving a player like Ogunbowale enters the picture, it becomes almost impossible for the result alone to stay at the center. And that really sums up why this story has exploded the way it has. It is not just that there was a report of an alleged arrest. It is that the report came at the exact moment Ogunbowale should have been celebrating a championship contribution. The exact moment Miss BC should have been enjoying one of its biggest accomplishments. And the exact moment the league should have been leaning into a positive headline. Instead, a cloud formed over all of it almost immediately. Now, the entire basketball world is in wait-and-see mode. Fans want to know whether the allegation will be officially confirmed. Media outlets will be looking for documentation, statements, and follow-up details. The Wings will be expected to provide an update once they know more. And Ogunbowale's response, whenever it comes, will likely shape the next phase of the conversation in a major way. Until then, the story remains exactly where so many high-profile sports controversies begin, in a space between a serious initial report and the official facts that have yet to fully catch up. That is why people are watching so closely. This is no longer just about Miss BC winning a championship in Unrivaled. It is about whether one of the game's biggest names is now facing a much more serious issue off the court. For now, all anyone can say with certainty is that what should have been a straightforward championship celebration has turned into one of the most talked about developments in women's basketball. And until more information comes out, the questions around Arike Ogunbowale, the Dallas Wings, and what really happened in Miami are only going to keep growing.